All the chaos that happened in this film began when Nick returned from his brother's bar and came home to a living room in a mess with an overturned and broken table, as if violence had occurred. Nick couldn't find his wife at home even though he had searched everywhere. Nick actually came home because he wanted to discuss his divorce plans with his wife. He called the police for help in finding his wife. Detective Bonnie examined the entire house, and some oddity were found. Nick was taken to the police station for further questioning while his house was still being investigated by the police, as it became the crime scene. Nick was asked to stay elsewhere temporarily. Nick said he would stay at Margot's house, his sister's. Before being allowed to leave the police station, Nick was asked several questions about Amy that he couldn't answer. What her daily activities were like, who her friends were in the city, and what Amy's blood type was. Nick couldn't answer at all. He was confused and seemed to have never known what his wife's life was like all this time. Several hours after Amy's disappearance report, a neighbor came to Bonnie at the crime scene. A woman named Noelle claimed to be Amy's friend and had some information about Amy. New clues were found in the house after the forensic team discovered a bloodstain in the kitchen. This evidence was quite suspicious, especially after Bonnie asked Noelle about Amy. She admitted that Amy was pregnant and often talked about her husband's abusive behavior. Bonnie found the first clue, an envelope in Amy's wardrobe with the word leave written on it. The next day, on July 6th, a day after Amy went missing, Amy's parents came to the police station after being informed by Nick about their daughter's disappearance. They attended a press conference where the family would seek public assistance in the search for Amy. The arrival of Amy's parents was not very helpful. They only mentioned two men who were obsessed with Amy, Desi Collins and Tommy O'Hara. Both of them were Amy's ex-boyfriends. Bonnie, as the detective handling the case, felt that this case was quite complicated. She informed about the clue on the envelope that Nick admitted was part of a treasure hunt game that he and Amy usually did to celebrate their anniversary. Clue after clue led Nick and Bonnie to another clue, until Nick had a third clue without Bonnie's knowledge. It was a clue with a confusing sentence, and Nick seemed stuck. He was confused and kept remembering his deteriorating marriage with Amy, as both of them became unemployed. Plus, Nick's mother's condition worsened and they had to move from New York to Nick's hometown. Since then, their marriage was no longer the same. 2 days after Amy disappeared, the search intensified, and Bonnie tried to find more information. However, Nick always worsens the situation. He makes a lot of mistakes and his behavior is strange, leading to suspicions from those around him. Rumors started to circulate, mostly painting Nick in a negative light, accusing him of being responsible for Amy's disappearance. He feels pressured and stressed by the confusing situation he's facing. He swears that he doesn't know the whereabouts of his wife or what happened to her. Many pieces of information tarnish Nick's reputation in the eyes of the public. Some media outlets escalate the situation by spreading rumors that may not be true. Bonnie continues to try to track down Amy, gathering information from Jason, a drug dealer. Jason claims that Amy approached him before to buy a small gun. When she came to Jason, she appeared desperate and anxious. 3 days after Amy went missing, Nick's affair with a student named Andy is known by Margot. This angers Margot greatly. However, Nick becomes honest about everything he has been through regarding his marriage with Amy, which was actually very troubled, and his plan to divorce Amy because he couldn't bear her behavior anymore. The situation doesn't look good for Nick. All the gossip and rumors surrounding his name can no longer be contained. All eyes are on him, judging him as if Nick is the only person guilty of Amy's disappearance. Only Bonnie, who doesn't want to hastily accuse Nick. Bonnie feels that there are too many anomalies in this case, and she herself doesn't believe that Nick is the perpetrator. The forensic team's results have come out, confirming the presence of violence. This puzzle becomes even more complicated for Bonnie. Moreover, issues continue to arise during the search, such as Noelle, who suddenly appears during the search and shouts in the midst of the crowd that Amy is pregnant. People immediately chase after Nick to demand an explanation. Bonnie quickly secures Nick and questions him about several findings from the investigation, such as the purchase of luxury items with a credit card that seems unusual, and the increase in Amy's life insurance premiums signed by Nick. However, Nick swears that he never bought anything mentioned by Bonnie. As for the issue of Amy's life insurance premiums, Nick again swears that it was Amy's idea and she herself asked Nick to sign it. Nick feels deceived after learning that Amy was pregnant. He became convinced that something was amiss with all the chaos and Amy's disappearance. Since then, Nick refuses to speak with Bonnie without being accompanied by a lawyer. He desperately tries to find a solution to his problems. Bonnie continues to search for suspicious things related to Amy. She finds them at Nick's father's house, a diary belonging to Amy that wasn't completely burned. Meanwhile, Nick manages to find Amy's final clue, items purchased by Amy using Nick's credit card. He finds all those luxury items in Margot's wooden shed. So, what really happened? Amy didn't actually die, wasn't murdered, wasn't kidnapped. None of the assumptions people had about her are true. Amy actually ran away and sought revenge for Nick's long-known affair with Andy. Amy wanted to make Nick suffer. She devised a meticulous plan that would involve Nick in trouble with the police, subject him to the judgment of many people, and ultimately imprison him on charges of murdering Amy. Her plan was well prepared. She arranged everything. She built a good image in front of many people, elicited sympathy for her situation, and exploited Nick's neglectful nature to make her plan even more perfect. What Amy did was a perfect crime and manipulation that would destroy Nick. Meanwhile, Amy was actually wandering outside, hiding, disguising herself, and waiting for the right time for her final act. She wanted to commit suicide and convince everyone that Nick had killed his wife. However, her plan didn't go as smoothly as Amy thought. Nick had discovered the wickedness of Amy's intentions. Margot was informed about this and subsequently suggested that Nick hire a renowned lawyer named Tanner Bolt, who would help Nick avoid Amy's trap. Nick met with Tanner, who then became his lawyer. Tanner suggested that Nick meet Amy's former lovers, Tommy and Desi, to seek support and uncover Amy's deception. Nick immediately followed his advice. He met with Tommy and learned the fact that Amy was highly skilled at manipulating stories and seeking revenge. Tommy had been falsely accused of raping Amy, which almost landed him in jail, and he had struggled for years to find a job due to his criminal record. Nick became more convinced that something was wrong with Amy. He believed that what she was doing now was a form of revenge for his affair with Andy. The situation worsened with media-fueled gossip on television. Throughout it all, Amy closely monitored the progress of her case on television. She was ecstatic if everything went as planned. Meanwhile, Nick was working hard to restore his reputation and uncover his wife's lies. Nick even sought out Desi to inquire about his story with Amy. However, he was different from Tommy. Desi appeared to have no issues and admitted that he still loved Amy. Bonnie still didn't believe that Nick was the perpetrator. She didn't believe it without clear evidence that Nick actually killed Amy. Time continued to pass, and now Nick was assisted by Tanner to resolve his accusations. Tanner asked Nick to disclose his affair with Andy and the gifts he found in Margot's house shed. However, Nick hesitated to do so because he suspected that Tanner had another plan, which involved putting Nick on a reality show to garner sympathy for him. At the same time, Amy was robbed. Two individuals she encountered at the motel took her money. Now she had no money at all and desperately needed help. Amy called someone for assistance. She contacted Desi, who still loved Amy. Desi agreed to help Amy, planning to take the woman to his private residence near the lake, an isolated place with tight security. Meanwhile, Nick had already attended the reality show. However, the situation was beyond both Amy's and Nick's expectations. Suddenly, Andy revealed her affair with Nick. However, this confession didn't deter Nick from speaking on the reality show he was invited to. He purposely wore the tie and watch given by Amy, trying to garner sympathy from the audience and turn the tables on her. Nick knew what he was going to do. Amy seemed to have a change of heart after watching the show featuring Nick's confession. She couldn't bear being with Desi, who was so possessive with her. So she planned her escape from Desi. Margot and Nick were arrested after the show aired, following a citizen's report about items in Margot's shed. However, they were soon released with Tanner's help. Amy proceeded with her plan to free herself from Desi by killing him. After 30 days of disappearance, Amy returned to her home with a bloodied body. The FBI took over Amy's case. Meanwhile, Nick and Bonnie were preparing to expose Amy's lie. Amy's acting was so convincing and gained sympathy from many people. The situation became horrible for Nick. He was anxious because he had to be with Amy again, who admitted to being Desi's killer. Nick had many thoughts about separating, but Amy kept holding him back. She even claimed to be pregnant and believed that the child was Nick's. It became increasingly difficult for Nick to leave. He was forced to endure his marriage, full of drama and problems, with Amy. And the film ended.